Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hit and Hustle from irisportsdaily.com. I am your host, Greg Flamong, and with me, as always, is Jamie Uwiyama, Jamie University. It is Tuesday, May 2nd, and we are going to talk about the commitment of 2024 safety Kennedy Urlacher. That commitment was announced yesterday. We are going to talk about the transfer of Logan Diggs, who put himself in the portal. I believe it was last Friday. It was last week sometime, so we're going to talk about that. Yeah, and what that means for the running back room and the running back situation. We're going to talk about the NFL draft. Notre Dame saw 3 players drafted on over the weekend, and then they had a number of players go into undrafted. They signed undrafted free agency deals. So we're going to talk about that. And then we are going to talk about the Notre Dame roster and what kind of talent they have on the roster going forward. Jamie wrote a really good article about Notre Dame players in the draft and the positions that are valued by the NFL and the types of players that are going into the draft from Notre Dame and their best players and how they fit into, what the NFL is looking for and what they value really highly. So that's what we're going to talk about. But first, Jamie, I want to talk to everybody about ESQ clothing because they have the world's first high quality bamboo shirt. It is the softest and most comfortable shirt you'll ever put on. It's not only more sustainable than cotton, but also feels cooler, has stretch, is odor and wrinkle resistant, even machine washable. You've seen ESQ's one-piece collar bamboo shirt on every photo of Marcus Freeman, including his photo at the White House. It's the perfect shirt for today's business meeting and heading for a night out. Check out ESQclothing.com and upgrade your shirt game. All right, Jamie. Notre Dame got a bit of good news yesterday from the recruiting on the recruiting aspect. 2024 safety Kennedy Urlacher committed to Notre Dame. He is out of I think it's Chandler, Arizona. Did I get that right? I believe it was.
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, Chandler, Arizona. 3-star safety, and we're going to talk about how he fits into the class right now, Jamie. And you had some thoughts on him. Tell us about him. Your film don't lie. What is Notre Dame getting in Kennedy Urlacher?
I mean, they're getting a guy who's physical, like he's a downhill player, right? Like he's a guy that he's got some of the bigger hits you're going to see from anyone this cycle. Obviously, this one's just a nice little scoop and score, right?
Yeah.
He's just kind of like right place, right time. And obviously, you love to see guys making plays, right? No matter what, even if it's like a bit of a gift, whatever you want to see that. It's always a good thing if you're in the right spot at the right time. Like this kind of play right here too, where he is like decleating the guy and you don't get too many of those hits, and he's got several of them.
Especially when it's not a guy who a lot of decletions you see, like the guy doesn't see him coming. Like that's the running back.
Yes.
Coming right in his face.
Up.
He knows it's gonna hit him, and he still got crushed. So
block kick right there. Like always like to see, here's him in coverage. And he makes a nice play on the ball there, but that is kind of like getting into kind of like my question with him, because I don't see, there's a lot more of this last clip that you see of him, coming downhill, playing here he is in the box, basically, breaking on a thing. I don't see a guy who's smooth out of his transitions. Like I think he's a guy who's plays a bit high in terms of like his hips and stuff. He's not a guy that, is like super technically sound in terms of like how he is out of his pedal or just his in transitions in general. I don't think he's a guy who really kind of like explodes, out of like when he has to transition, or like when he's got to like break on the ball. Like this kind of play is like, that is exactly the kind of play that he excels in, right? Like playing downhill, tackling in space, making that kind of play right there. But like even that kind of play that gets on there, like that is on the highlight clip. Like I don't really get it, you don't see, and they play like obviously when they do a lot of stuff like where he's like single high like this, but everything is downhill, right? Everything is downhill. You don't really see him open up, even on that one pick that he had open up. That was a gift, right? That was a gift. This where you see him like run in a straight line. He looks plenty fast in a straight line, right? He looks plenty fast in a straight line. He looks like a guy who is can play physical, is going to hit through. He looks more than fine running down on this kick right now. Like, he's not slow, right? He's not slow. He's not like a bad athlete overall. He's just not. Is he a box safety? And if he's a box safety, I mean, that's like a dead position in college football these days, right? Like, that's just, you're not going to play too many teams where a box safety is going to be needed, right? Like, look at where Notre Dame played last year. I mean, count the number of times they had 8 guys in the box, and it's not a lot, right? It's not a lot, right? So, and that would be like an 8th defender in the box, right? It would be that box safety. So when you're not playing too many things like that, that doesn't really fit within. I'm not sure his skill set kind of fits within the regular like base defense. Now, I do think, because I know they talked to him about like that DJ Brown, what is kind of like that role of what DJ Brown played in the first open practice that we went to on April 1st, which was primarily a sub package, practice in terms of what they were doing personnel wise. And they played big dime, right? So they played 3 safeties, and DJ Brown was the 3rd safety, and he was essentially near the line of scrimmage the whole time. He was blitzing, he's lined up in the box, he's doing all these other kind of things. He was basically attacking. And it's a little bit like what Drew Tranquill kind of played, this similar kind of big dime when he before his injury in 2015. Yeah, right. So if you go back to the Virginia game, right, which everybody remembers that Virginia game because of the big comeback, and obviously the dejected fan on the sidelines and the big play to Will Fuller, and Kaiser kind of saving the day. But like, from a defensive perspective, there was a lot of like really exciting stuff from Drew Tranquill there when he was kind of still in that safety role, and he wasn't starting at safety, but he was that extra safety that played in like kind of like almost in a Rover-esque type of role, right? So could Urlacher kind of play that? I think maybe. Is he someone who's playing like, is Notre Dame going to switch? Or are they like keeping it open to maybe switching to transitioning to more of kind of a little bit what Marcus Freeman did at Cincinnati? And they had that sniper role, which is similar to the Rover. And that was the guy that I compared him to, was Jarrell White, who was a very good player for Cincinnati, but he was an undersized linebacker, right? He was an undersized linebacker, instinctive, good tackler, guy, really good blitzer, whatever. But he wasn't a guy. I mean, there's a reason he was, even though he was 198 pounds or whatever, that he didn't play safety. Like, he was a downhill, he was a box defender. So is that kind of what they see for Urlacher? Is Urlacher going to be, obviously, I mean, we haven't even mentioned that his dad is Brian Urlacher, right? I think most Notre Dame fans have figured it out.
I know by now, yeah.
Pretty, not a common name.
Not a lot of Urlachers running around.
Yeah, the famous Urlachers in the Chicago suburbs. But so I think, maybe there's the thought that this guy is going to kind of what Bryce Young has already done, where you see his like massive physical development, what Joe Alt did, where there's going to be this massive physical development. And then all of a sudden, Kennedy is going to be 6'3", 240 one day or whatever, and he's going to be a Mike linebacker. And maybe, I don't know, but I mean, he's whatever, 6'1", 185 right now. I mean, that's a lot to gain. That's a lot to gain. And it's a little bit different when you're projecting like a lineman, especially guys who are super duper long. And then when you're projecting that, and I know his dad was, a little bit of a late bloomer in terms of his physical development. So, I mean, that could certainly happen with him. But I know one of the things with this was a big thing with Howard Cross, where his dad was a former, Notre Dame loves these the sons of these former, and why not? The guys are really good players.
They work out. Yeah.
They work out most of the time, right? But Howard Cross, his dad was Howard Cross II, who was a tight end in the NFL. I think he went to Alabama.
I think that is right. Yes.
Yeah. And he played for the New York Giants, and he was a big inline tight end. He was like 6'5", 270, right? And that was always the thing with Howard Cross, that people were like, his dad grew like 5 inches when he got to college, right? So that was like the thing. And people thought, oh man, maybe Howard Cross is going to be like 6'5", and he's going to be like 320 or something. Like, everyone kind of thought that. Well, it turned out that, I mean, he didn't grow one lick. He got bigger, but the height didn't happen for him. He's still been a good player for Notre Dame, but that didn't happen. So it just shows you nothing's guaranteed, based on, his dad did this, so this is whatever, right? Because that's what happened with it didn't happen with Howard Cross. So we don't know what's going to happen with Urlacher. But I see him, if they see him as that, like, kind of sub package player, the big Don, the nickel linebacker, whatever, then I'm like, okay, I can get it. And I do think that he's someone who could end up developing eventually into a good, very useful player for Notre Dame. But I mean, safety is a big need in this class.
Yeah.
And if he's not a guy who can play deep, then you can't really play as a safety. You can't play as a safety in base defense. You can't, right? Or on third down, if you can't play, like, you have to be able to do those things. You have to be able, can you play man coverage? Can you do that? Because I don't see traits from him that I'm like, oh, this guy, I mean, he can cover a slot, or he can do this. Like, I don't see that from him. So if that's the case, then obviously, I mean, they're in a good position, as Matt kind of mentioned on power. They're in a really good position for a lot of safeties in this class. Mm-hmm. And I would think 100% they're still take at least 2 guys who could play deep. They would have to. And I don't view him as a pure safety at all.
Right. Yeah, same. The way I view him is, I view it as like you're taking an athlete. Like, to me, the safety position has not been recruited yet. They don't have a commitment. Like, I see him as an athlete because I think Notre Dame sees him as an athlete. Like, and I get it, right? Like, I watch his tape and I see him and I watch him play, and it's like, hey, you want that guy in the building. You want him on your team, because look, you want a butt kicker. And I have no problem with that. But it's like, I don't think he's a safety. Yeah. So to me, it doesn't really matter. Like, to me, he's an athlete, like Drew Tranquil, right? Just kind of an athlete. Like, in 2014, like Van Gorder, like, put him on the edge and just sent him on blitzes all the time, And so, like, look, whatever. If they have a role for him, they have a role for him. I don't mind that. To me, it's like, just, because I've been thinking about this a lot, because it's like, I don't like it I don't like his game as a safety. I just don't like you said, like, if you're already if they're talking to him about sub packages and stuff, Notre Dame doesn't have the luxury with their depth chart at safety to be talking about, so they shouldn't be counting him towards safety numbers, I guess, is a better way to put it.
Yeah.
Because after this year, guaranteed Harper is gone and DJ Brown is gone, right? So that's just guaranteed going to happen. They're out of eligibility. If Xavier Watts has a good year, he is a senior. He is going to graduate after this year.
Yeah.
If he has a good season, he might just say, hey, I'm graduated. I'm going to go to the NFL, right? I'm getting my snaps. I've gotten time. I'm a full-time starter. If he has a good year, he will move on to the NFL. That's 3 guys. Then all that's left is Ramon Henderson, Ben Minnick, and Adon Schuler. Ben Minnick and Adon Schuler are true freshmen, right? Adon Schuler, they're both on campus now, but both got hurt. So we don't know, right? That's why they're looking in the portal for someone with multiple years of eligibility, because they have this problem. They didn't take anyone in 22. 23 has this. So their depth numbers are a big problem at safety. So to me, it's like, if they are counting Kennedy Urlacher as a safety, then they need to take 3, if not 4.
Yeah. So. Well, and okay. So the other thing is that I think, when you mentioned with all those guys, I think they still probably going to have to take someone in the portal next year, right? So like in December, right? They're still going to have to get somebody to compete there. And safety is like, I think it was good to get a guy like Thomas Harper, but safety, if you're looking right now, like where teams are coming out of spring, and obviously Notre Dame isn't in like a desperate mode at safety right now. But right now it's like there's not enough good safeties who are in the portal and a ton of teams who need safeties.
Yeah.
And it's a very hard thing. It's so also too, it also opens up to like, well, maybe Notre Dame will move a corner and all that kind of stuff. There's all that kind of possibility. But yeah, I agree. They're going to have to take at least, if you're counting them as a safety, you're going to have to take at least 3 safeties. Yes. And maybe 4 and maybe 4. And then, you go, Greg, and then
I was just going to say, like, David Solomon says, like, keep in mind, he's only a junior. He'll get better at pass defense between now and the time he shows up at Notre Dame. Plus, they expect him to have another growth spurt. Don't get me twisted here. It's not that I don't like him as a take. That's not it. It's that it's like if Drew Tranquill was coming in and they were like, we love him as a safety, I'd be like, well, I don't like that. Like, I don't think that's good. I don't think that's his best position. And so, and that turned out to be true. They played him at safety. And it wasn't very good. Right. Then they moved him inside and it's like, oh, okay. Now we actually have a football player. I think that's the case with Kennedy Urlacher. I do. Yeah. So to me, it's like the fact that he's brought in as a safety makes people a little bit down on him. If you told me he was going to come in and play inside, he was going to get bigger and play like rover or middle linebacker or something. It's like, okay, now I think now we got something, and now I feel like that's a good fit for him.
Okay, so I mean, here's another example, right? Jalen Sneed, right, who was still wasn't the biggest when he came in, right? I mean, but still bigger than obviously Urlacher. But he was a guy who played multiple positions. He played off-ball linebacker, then he played the edge, and then he played free safety on his senior season, right? And I look at Jalen Sneed as a free safety, and the way he moves and transitions, and he's like a much smoother, twitchier athlete than Urlacher. So it's not even about like, oh, he'll get better at passing. I'm not saying that he won't get better at passing or have like this monster senior year that can totally change our minds about it. And it's not even say that like, yes, say, I think Jim Scales mentions Kennedy Urlacher, football player. That's fine. We're both fine with them taking him as a football player.
It's fine, right?
We're fine with them taking him as a football player, but just if he's a safety, I don't see it. Maybe I will see it from more of stuff from the senior, but most of the time, based on what I think he's missing, I don't know if he's going to have that as a senior. It's not really about like, oh, making more plays or anything like that. It's about like, you have to judge based on like traits and like just athleticism, physical traits, fluidity, all these kind of things, right? And I just wanted to bring up, so Eastside Irish mentions how many players ND recruits for secondary but turn out to be slow, no playmaking, or get turned into a linebacker. Like none, really. I can't think of any guys recently that they've done it. Like I guess
bring in a lot of safeties.
I mean, I guess the last guy was Drew Tranquill. I mean, obviously that worked out pretty well, and that was 2014 when he signed. So that was like 9 years ago, right? So I can't really think of anybody else that they really did do that. Like there were some guys, I mean, obviously some safeties they moved to, maybe like a Spencer Perry type or whatever, but he was barely on the team for very long. So I don't know. It really hasn't been something they've done. Maybe it's just how they kind of view, maybe it is something, maybe it does speak to the direction they want to go on defense in terms of like playing more with a sub package kind of thing. And, or maybe they're just like totally sold that he's going to be like 220 and whatever, and he's going to be a will linebacker one day. Right. Cause I think if I could, I'd be intrigued to see him as a 220-pound will linebacker, but for sure. I think we'll see.
I mean, if he is so like 6'1" now listed, right? Like if he gets to true 6'3" or whatever, Like,
it just changes.
Why wouldn't you move him in? But first of all, why wouldn't you move him inside? That's what I'm saying. Like, if he's big enough, then just move him inside. Like, that's his game. He wants to come downhill. He wants to hit people. He wants to wreak havoc. Like, that's not a guy who is best used like on the hash, like playing center field, playing the hashes, right?
Yeah.
That's not what you wanted. You wouldn't want him to do that anyway. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I like him better inside. I like him moving downhill all the time. I don't want him matching up against the slot. I don't want him, playing single high and being the one deep guy back there. Like, that's not using him to his best ability and what his game is. So that's how I see it. I like the take. It's fine. Yeah. Like Jim Scales said, football player, get him in the building. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then I think whatever, I'm just going to go back against what Drunk Vigo said here is ND has to gamble with projects. It's like, they really don't. And they haven't really, because
I don't think he's a project either. That's the other thing.
I think there's projection with him. If like
you're projecting like like size though,
size and stuff like that. Yeah. Yes. And I think that is, that's important. But I think Notre Dame in the last 2.5 classes, the Freeman classes, right? Like they're landing 80%, like 4 stars and up. So they're not landing the 5 stars, and they need to land more 5 stars for sure. But they're not landing. They're not landing a lot of guys who have the ranking similar to Urlacher. And then even a lot of the guys that they do, or who maybe are underranked at the time. So like I mentioned in this other thing, like Armel Mukum, when they offered him, 24/7 had him ranked 1,000 something. Like he was not like whatever when he was going into his senior season. When they flipped him from Stanford, he was like ranked 1,000 by 24/7. They ended up ranking him in the top 200, right? Like they've done a good job of recognizing guys with projectable traits and talent. And a lot of guys, I think people want to think that everybody that, Notre Dame, it's like, oh, guy commits to Notre Dame, he moves down. First of all, it doesn't work like that. I think a lot of people think that there's this big bias, but it's not really there. And they think they're doing a better job with a lot of these guys because they end up rising quite a bit because they get in on them early and they have these like kind of traits that project to potentially being like NFL players at some point, right? Like NFL players, high level college football players at some point.
Absolutely. So, all right, that's Kennedy Urlacher. Let's move on to Logan Diggs, who entered the transfer portal over the weekend. As I think a lot of people have heard by now, like not super surprising given the fact that he was frequently talked about as someone who could enter the portal. Had a tough time at Notre Dame, just period. Like being in South Bend, being away from home. He's from Louisiana. I think they had to talk him back into the program basically every year, every semester, all the time. And they couldn't in this instance. So he's leaving the program. Good luck to Logan Diggs, I guess. It's to me, it's always weird. Like you're a running back leaving the school that is known to run the ball the most. He was going to get a ton of work again. We got a ton of work last year. I don't know how this really helps, right? Like I don't know how this helps him be a pro. I don't know how this helps him. Obviously academically, unless he goes to Stanford or something, you're taking a step down academically. But hey, man, if you're not happy somewhere, then go be happy somewhere else, right? So that's what it is.
I think that's pretty much the only way to kind of see it, because from a football perspective, I don't think it makes sense really. Or does it make a ton of sense? Like it's not like it definitely wasn't definitely wasn't a decision based on football, because you're going to run behind a good offensive line. He was the number 1 back all of last season, or for the majority of last season.
He usually started.
Yes. I mean, I think one of the people's Notre Dame fans' biggest complaint was Audric Estime wouldn't get a carry until like the end of the first quarter or something like that. And that's because Diggs was the starter, right? And he averaged in the last 10 games of the season, he averaged 16 point something touches per game, and Estime averaged 12.8. So he averaged more touches. He obviously was like productive. Like he's a good football player. Like, I mean, I just saw some, like, there's always some wild things that people just get bitter that people leave. It's like someone was like, good, easily the least talented running back in the roster. Like, he started. Like, no, that's not. And like, and also too, you can also confidently say, like, there were some people who were like, this guy sucks when Notre Dame took him, whatever. He wasn't the highest rated guy. I was really high on him. I think I was proven right. The guy's pretty good. He's a pretty good player. I think, I mean, I would be shocked if he went anywhere other than LSU. I don't think they have, like, I think one of the things too is that probably they were in his ear a little bit more too, because I don't think they have a very clear running back like I don't think they have situation, right? I don't think they do, because like John Emery, who was like a really highly recruited guy, who was like a 5-star kid, he's like never a good sign when you're like, a guy is entering his 4th year and he's on academic probation, so he missed the spring, so that's never a good sign. So I don't think they can really count on him. And I mean, I know obviously LSU recruits well, right? They've got other backs there, but I mean, if you told me that Logan Diggs went there and rushed for like 1,000 yards or whatever, like, I wouldn't be surprised. I just kind of think that Logan Diggs could have stayed and just been like, oh man, this sucks. Like, I hate it here. And he could have left after a year and probably got drafted. Like, that's probably what would have happened. But also too, I've been someone who went to a school where I was miserable and I didn't like it and whatever. And it was like nothing football. And it wasn't football wise that was really pushing me towards going somewhere else, but I didn't want to stay because I just was miserable there. So, I mean, I hope he's happy. I mean, I think he's probably going to go close to home, obviously at LSU. And I mean, people can say that maybe he had like kind of one foot out the door the whole time, but he played well for Notre Dame. I mean, he represented the school well, didn't get into trouble or anything like that. I think people, it sucks that, because he's a loss for the program in terms of like, he would have helped the team next year. But, you wish him the best.
It's just a bummer. CFB hurts. He committed to Notre Dame. He committed before he visited. He visited before he enrolled, but he committed before visiting university. So that's that situation. So, I mean, look, that was the COVID year, right? No one could take visits. You couldn't get on campus. You couldn't do any of that stuff. So, it's tough, right? It is what it is. As far as the roster, it's interesting. I think Jeremiah Love, he tweeted something out. I think he's got a pep in his step, right? I mean, now there is a clear path for him. I mean, because again,
all those running backs, I mean, it have to be like, I mean, they're not maybe happy in one sense because maybe they really like Logan. I don't know, right? But they got to be. They're going to get more chances.
I mean, Javon Payne, you're getting work.
Yeah,
that's a thing. And here's the other part too. And this is where I think the way the schedule sets up in 2023 really helps, because now you have the 3 games, to get ready to go for Ohio State. You don't need to give Estime a ton of work, right? Like, he doesn't have to get 20 plus carries. You can break him in a little bit. Same thing with Javon Payne. You can give him 10 carries a game now against some of the teams early on the schedule. Get him used to action, right? It gives you an opportunity to do the same thing with Jeremiah Love, right? You can just ease him in, right? Ease him in, give him 5-6 touches a game. By the time the big games come up, you can then have him ready to go in whatever capacity there is. So I think that really works for Notre Dame. Say prayers. Rajon says, save prayer for Jadarian Price's Achilles. I still think this doesn't change anything for me. Be patient with it. Be very patient with it. You have Estime, you have Payne, you have Jeremiah Love coming in. Like, don't Don't mess around with this. I wouldn't. Another thing that also I wouldn't mess around with Tyree going back to running back. I'd say keep him at the slot. Let him build there.
It's the break glass in case of emergency option.
Yeah. So that's that situation there. So yeah, I think that they should. I mean, look, it's a loss now because you don't know exactly what you're getting from Jabron Payne when he comes in. You know what you're getting from Logan Diggs. Played in real big games, high leverage moments, and that sort of thing. So you're losing that. But look, next man up, like Notre Dame always says. All right. On to the NFL draft. Notre Dame saw 3 players drafted. I think probably 2 players that went lower than I think people would think. Like Michael Mayer went a little bit lower at 35. Didn't go in the first round. A lot of people surprised by that. I'm not sure how people feel about Jarrett Patterson going in the 6th round to the Texans. I think given the injuries and that sort of thing, I think you feel like Jarrett Patterson's better than a 6th round pick, just generally, like 4 or 5 maybe. But with all the injuries and everything, like that's going to push him down. And Isaiah Foskey goes, I think, certainly a lot higher than I expected at 40. But that kind of goes to Jamie, what you were talking about, right? Isaiah, it's the positions of value, right? Michael Mayer falls to 30 or 35, 3rd tight end taken. Foskey goes 40. He's the 9th defensive end taken, right? If he was the 3rd defensive end, he'd go in the top 10, right? So that's just kind of the difference in the 2 players and the positions that they play. I think Mike Frank should apologize for his Lions taking an Iowa tight end ahead of that's, to me, that's just kind of silly.
I think they will end up regretting that.
I think that's silly. Like, look, the other thing with Kincaid, right? They're different kind of players. Kincaid is like basically a slot. He's not even really a tight end. He's not going to play in line. He's got the back problem. Look. Since when is it like, oh, you have a back problem, A, and B, no workouts, doesn't work out at all, and it's like he's the number 1 tight end taken. Meanwhile, Michael Mayer, like never missing anything. He missed 1 game to injury, and he would have played, but Notre Dame didn't let him.
Yeah.
With the adductor, and completely solid, in and out. He can play in line. He can play wide. He can do all these other things. Good blocker, and the whole. It's very frustrating to me too when like everyone talks about, he's like he's overrated as a blocker, right? And it's like, look, Michael Mayer, the last 2 years can't come off the field. He is their main receiving weapon. Of course, he's not going to be to reach his potential as a blocker. He has to save himself. Like, what are you? Come on. Like, so that's the other part.
It's a lot different than like when Mitchell Evans has to come in, and then he's the the inline guy who's coming in and just when it's running play, whatever. It's a different story, right?
Yeah,
it's a different story. And then I think even for that Tommy Tremble year and how valuable he was a blocker. I mean, he wasn't as involved in the pass game as Mayer was. So it's a completely different thing. And I'm not saying that Mayer is on the same level that Tremble was as a blocker, but I'm saying that is a real thing. That is a real thing. I do think that, I am a fan of Dalton Kincaid. I think if he's healthy, he's going to be great. I do think he's going to be really good. And I do think that is one of those things where it's like, if you're just you're essentially looking for a big slot is if you're getting him, they're hoping that he is Travis Kelce, right? So maybe he will be, I don't know. Right. But I do think when after everything was done, he goes to the Raiders. They obviously just traded Darren Waller. He's going to go in there, be tight end 1 right away, and going to catch like a ton of passes. He's going to catch a ton of passes, be a big part of the thing. And years from now, who cares? The guy's I think he's going to be a guy who goes to a bunch of Pro Bowls and plays if he's healthy, right? Obviously, health is always a big thing, but if he's healthy, he'll play 10 years in the league and go to a bunch of Pro Bowls. So, in the end, it doesn't matter. He's still a great player. And, I'm excited about him. I think I'm excited about the fit for him. I think that's a good fit for him.
Yeah. I mean, look, good football player, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Josh McDaniels, also big tight end guy, gets the ball to tight end. So, yeah.
So, look, he's great. And Jim Scales makes a good point. Like, it would have been brutal for Brock Wright to have Michael Mayer come into the tight end room again. It would have been like Toby showing up in the office and Michael looking at him like,
yeah.
Why are you here? Why are you this way?
No.
No. Yeah. So it's just like that would have been funny. I mean, so like, look, whatever. It is what it is. I mean, especially when like you look at the league and the way that they look at things, right? Like, why do people like Sam Laporta? Good 10-yard split, good elusiveness, like broke a lot of tackles, right? Fine, whatever. Like at some point, it's like, look, Michael Mayer was obviously very, very good. And but that's okay, right? That's all right. But it goes to and that kind of goes to that kind of leads us into the point of the second half of the show. There's something that was brought up to us yesterday about, the way that the Notre Dame roster is constructed. It doesn't lend itself to super high draft picks, right? Like, look, when they have the good offensive line, right? So like offensive linemen obviously are very hot commodities in the NFL, right? So they had Mike McGlinchey come out, they had Quentin Nelson come out, and those guys got picked very high, right? And those are top line players. When your top line players are on positions of need, then they'll get picked higher, right? Isaiah Foskey, he went a lot higher than a lot of people thought, right? Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah, he dropped. Why? Because he's an off-ball linebacker.
He's an off-ball linebacker.
So it's like that's not highly valued unless you're the Lions and you want someone from Iowa. Then it's different.
But, I mean, it just shows it's like one guy, one person,
and everyone said it was ridiculous. So it's like that's kind of how it's viewed. I think Kyle Hamilton, the same thing, right? Like Kyle, he was so extreme in the kind of special category that he goes really high, even though he fell. Like people thought he was going to be a top 5 pick, and he fell. Why? Because he's a safety, and safeties just don't carry that kind of cachet, right? So I think that's where it is. That's where it's been, and I think you'll see in next draft, Notre Dame's got Joe Alt. He was going to go very high. Why? Because he's a tackle, right? But Notre Dame, they're very good at accumulating tight ends. Tight ends don't go very high. The linebacker situation, right? Manti Te'o. I think Jalen Smith probably would have gone very high, but that's, the injury and that sort of thing. But he was also a freak. That's the other thing. Like if someone's going to be a freak athlete like that, they're going to get projected very high. JOK falls and that sort of thing. So Jamie, I wanted to talk about the Notre Dame roster and the kind of top end talent that they have on the roster in terms of, projecting onto the NFL, since the NFL draft just happened. And I think you look at Joe Alt and you look at Blake Fisher too. I don't know how people feel about Blake Fisher. I don't. It's well, like I don't like. So everyone looks at Joe Alt and says top 5 pick, right?
I saw a bunch of I don't even know why I click on them because they're always stupid, but they're worth less than nothing. The way too early mock drafts that come out like the day after this draft, and he was in the first round in a few.
I mean, if you know who Blake Fisher, okay,
so that's the other thing. He was like the 5th tackle or 6th tackle, but he still won in the first round. Like it's
so my thing is like, how do NFL people actually feel about it? I'm like, we don't have a great feel for that, right? And to me, it's like, look,
everything is all projectable, right?
Yeah,
it's all right.
To me, it's like, look, Notre Dame, you want to talk about your NIL situation, okay? Make it so that it is financially viable for Blake Fisher to come back and play left tackle for a year and bet on himself that way and get his degree from Notre Dame. Make it so. Because why go? Because this is the same thing that McGlinchey did, the same thing that Ronnie Stanley did. They all came back to get that one extra year and be the guy, right? And you can do that for him. You really can.
I mean, they both end up being top 10 picks.
Right. And you go from like being picked 30th to getting picked like 8th or 7th or whatever, right? Like, to me, make it happen, Notre Dame. All right. But beyond that, is there like a surefire number 1 pick, or not first round pick, like on this roster right now? Like, is there?
I mean, beyond Alt and
Beyond
them, like,
Alton,
no,
beyond Alton Fisher.
no. I mean, not even close, really, right? Like, that's the thing, right? Is that okay? So how the Ross? I do think there'll be more. There's a chance that there's more. So they had the 3 guys this year, right? That got drafted. I would say very likely that they get more than 3 next year. But like, okay, so out of the 18 players, so I did that 200 snap club, right? Of the guys who are sophomores, right? And so basically, if you play 200 snaps as a sophomore, you're going to be a good player for Notre Dame, essentially, right? Like you're going to be a guy who, like 80% of the guys become like multi-year starters, and over 50% of those guys get drafted in the NFL, right? Mm-hmm. And if you look at out of the last 20, there's been 20 guys who've been drafted from Notre Dame since 2020, right? 2 of those guys were transfers, Gilman and Skoranek. So just take them off because they weren't on the roster when Notre Dame in their second year, right? But everybody else, 50 out of the 18, 15 of the 18 guys played 200 snaps when they were sophomores. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, there's some late bloomers out there. Like JOK broke his foot in his second year. Maybe he would have been a guy who played 200 snaps probably or something. He would have found a role or whatever. Mm-hmm. So there's that. Liam Eichenberg was the other guy. He was the backup to McGlinchey. Hainsey was starting at the other. So whatever. Yeah, like it's not like there weren't good players in front of him. That's understandable. And the other guy was Ade. And it was like, maybe on another time, he easily would have played 200 snaps. And even though he was kind of more of like a project guy who had to develop, I mean, he had Kareem, Hayes, Aquara. There was just a lot of guys in front of him, right? So he didn't play 200, but he ended up being an NFL player, right? So current members on the team right now that are in the 200 snap club that are going to be draft eligible. So just the draft eligible guys, right? Mm-hmm. So Tyree, Clarence Lewis, Ramon Henderson, Riley Mills, Joe Alt, Blake Fisher, Jaden Thomas, Audric Stemme, Mitchell Evans, Maris Liufau. So obviously there's Sam Hartman. Cam Hart isn't on that list, but he's a guy that I would expect to get drafted. Jack Kaiser's not on the list. I think he has a chance. He maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. Xavier Watts, another guy who potentially has a chance. Jordan Botello potentially has a chance. But a lot of those guys from the list, I could see coming back. I mean, I think most of those guys. Mm. So if you look at it from that perspective, like there isn't another guy. I mean, there's definitely not a guy that. I mean, I guess you could say maybe Jaden Thomas just has a friggin' monster year, just an absolute monster year.
He's a wild card for sure.
Yeah, and then he becomes like a second round pick or something like that.
Yeah,
maybe that's something that could happen, but Stemme, I think, is a guy. I don't know when because it's running back, you never know. I don't think he's going to be back after this because I think he's gonna now, especially with Diggs gone, he's gonna
get more work.
He's gonna get more work. I think he's gonna have a monster year. Like I think just right now, bold prediction. I think just like 1,300 yards. That's on the table for a guy like him. Like so, if he has 1,300 yards and he has a big year, he's the main back. I think he'll leave. He'll go to the NFL, right? Mm-hmm. And I think because he's such a unique guy, he'll probably be valued and have a chance. Like Mitchell Evans, I think, is going to play in the NFL. But is he a guy who's going to leave and be a 3-and-out guy? I mean, I don't think so. I doubt it, right? Like, Tyree's making a position switch. Ramon Henderson, I think he's probably going to be around for another couple of years. Riley Mills, I could see leave, but also I could see him stay. Like, I don't know where he's got to have a big year. He hasn't had that breakthrough yet, right? And then like I don't know. I guess you could say Hart would be the only guy that you could be like, man, he really had to think. Because I think physically, if you look at the guys, and I went through it in that article, is that if you go through the guys that were drafted in the first round this year, a lot of guys had, it's all just about like, you have to have the physical traits, and he's got the physical traits. I don't know how fast he's going to run, but I imagine pretty fast. Right. So it's like, if he's a guy who tests well, has a great year, then who knows? Maybe he could be a guy who gets into that mix. But I would say as of now, probably not, but maybe. Right. But really, like, there's not a lot of guys. So, and I think it's ultimately beneficial to Notre Dame if there's not a lot of guys, because that means that a lot of those guys came back. Because there's certainly some guys I think who could leave that could be like late round picks or something like that. And, you know, you'd rather those guys stay and then have a chance to be day 2 picks the next year. But there's not, I think people think that because they won for so many years in a row, right? They had the 5 years, straight years of 10 wins or more, that the roster was like built up. It was like, man, you know, Brian Kelly really got, he didn't really leave talent wise. He didn't leave Marcus Freeman and the staff in like a great position, because, you know, the 2018 class, I mean, it was not a good class. It was not a good class. They had some, certainly, there's only 2 guys out of 27 who got picked from that class, right? So, I mean, that's horrible. Like, it's really bad at a class at a place like Notre Dame. And there's certainly good players like the Adam Lola twins, Tariq Bracy. You know, those guys were valuable
good
players.
College football players.
Good college football players. So I'm not saying like, you know, that, you know, who cares about if they got drafted or not in the long run if you're a Notre Dame fan. I'm just saying that they weren't top NFL guys, but they're good players, and that's fine. But yeah, ideally you want to have more NFL talent because you're going to play against those guys. And like the 2019 class, which had, you know, Hamilton, Foskey, Kyron, I mean, 3 just top notch guys. Of course you want that. But the rest of the class, it's Hart, who obviously has been a good player, but like Kaiser, Leofel, Bertrand, Corral, Cross, the only guy who's like an obvious NFL prospect, the guy who's like you'd be surprised if he didn't get drafted, is Hart out of those guys, because the other guys still have a lot to prove, right?
Yeah.
So, and like, I don't think like Howard Cross is a very good NFL player, but I don't think he's, or a college player, but I don't think he's going to play in the NFL. Like, he's just too small, right? So, I don't know. So, I mean, and then even if you look at like the 2020 class, which was, I mean, not a good class either, right? Where they had Mayer, obviously is a stud, but it's like Tyree, Botello, Watts, Henderson, Lewis. Those are the top guys from that class. And there's still a lot to prove there. And then even the 2021 class is a good class, even though some of the guys just bolted who, you know, people thought that they were going to be good. There's still a lot of good talent from there that's there, with like obviously Esteme, Thomas, Alt, Fisher, Evans. I mean, Anye, we'll see, but I think, you know, he's a guy who I think has a chance because of his measurables later on, whatever. And you got to see with guys like Rocco and Rubio. It's almost like too early to tell, but we'll see. Because if Rocco's a starter this year and has a good year, then maybe 2 years from now he is going to the NFL, right? Or like if Rubio all of a sudden takes a major jump, then all of a sudden 2 years from now he is going to the NFL, right? But like, it's just one of those things where it's like, they weren't like, they weren't loaded. Like, the top talent on the roster right now are the, you know, based on recruiting rankings, but also just based on what we've seen, I think is just like athletically, the most talented guys are guys who are going to be freshmen and sophomores.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with Hart is the shoulder. I think his shoulders really hurt him. I think that's going to prevent him from being drafted, to be honest. He's had the bad shoulder for every year. Every year he's had a bad shoulder. And so I think that's prevented him. I think that's prevented him from growing as a player a little bit, when you got to protect that shoulder all the time. And it's just like, you're always wearing the harness. Like, that's not good, right? Like, just, you don't want to have to play that way. Right. So I think that hurts him. I think he had the physical ability. I just think he got limited with the injuries and that sort of thing. As an NFL prospect, maybe I'm wrong, right? I think he has the physical ability for it. I just think the medicals are going to hurt him. So yeah, there's just not like that top end, like people are mentioning Ben Morrison in the chat. For sure. Like I think he's definitely
yeah.
he'll be like one or two.
But he's a sophomore. He's not draft eligible. Yeah.
Right. But he'll be like first round, second round, right? There are so many good corners, though. That's the thing. I mean, because like you look at like Devin Witherspoon. Did anyone know his name prior to last year? Now he's like the 5th pick in the draft.
Yeah.
So it's just like there's so many good corners, you know, like we get in our little Notre Dame bubble, which is fine, right? You can't cover every team, but like we think like, oh, the best players at Notre Dame are therefore the best players like in the nation. And it's like, look, like with Michael Mayer, right? Same thing.
And I think with Ben Morrison, where he gets picked, I mean, he's obviously a great player. Like we there's no debate about that. But like, let's just say he runs a 4.56 at the combine. Well, then he's probably not going to go in the first round. That's
he runs 4.50.
Yeah, or something like that. Like it's just like that kind of stuff really matters for a corner. So it's like he could be an All-American the next 2 years, but it just that's part of it with whatever. And if he's an All-American for the next 2 years, who cares? No one should care that Julian Love got drafted in the 4th round.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously he turned into a pretty good safety in the NFL, but like no one should care that he plays safety in the NFL. He's an All-American corner. He was great at Notre Dame. If you're a Notre Dame fan, you shouldn't be bothered by that at all. Like you're like, who cares? He was awesome at corner for Notre Dame.
And I think it's important too. So like Tobias, I think he has those physical traits. He's got to do it on the field, but like he's got the size, he's got like everything that NFL is looking for in terms of size and speed and all that stuff, right? So he has those physical traits. I think obviously Ben Morrison, I think Christian Gray, like that's one where it's like, okay, that's the type of body that you're looking for, the type of athletic ability that you're looking for at the major college level, that the pros are looking for, that sort of thing. Don't have it at safety. You don't. I mean, Jaden Thomas is a good one, right? Like Braylon James, I think has that kind of, you know, that type of body type similar to Tobias. I think. Caleb Smith. I mean, he's obviously very fast. So it's just like that's the thing. And people are talking about estimate too. The explosiveness piece. He's got to show explosiveness this year, and he slimmed down, and that's good, right? And hopefully he's running in some lighter boxes. He's not going to be as compacted as it was last year, but he's got to show some explosiveness, right? Because that was part of his game. Like that wasn't in there, right? I mean, what was his longest play last year?
I mean, he had like,
it was the arrow route against Cal.
Yeah, he had like multiple 30-yard runs, so it wasn't like he didn't show that he had something. But he's not a guy who's going to take it 60, right? So he's not that guy. And the other part of it is that. Other than Derrick Henry, like you're not going to find too many guys backs in the league who don't have that versatility that they can also be like a big part of the passing game. Right. Yeah. So it's part of the equation, right? It's why Jahmyr Gibbs like went as a high thing, because he has like he's incredible value as a receiver. Right. So,
and he ran 4.36.
That too. Right. He's an insane athlete, but so that is all the kind of thing that matters too. It's like, all that kind of stuff. It does matter. So I went through, looking at the positions in the first round. So if anyone wants to find it, you can find it on Irish Sports Daily, Learning from the First Round of the NFL Draft. That's the title of the piece that I wrote. And essentially, it's, Mayer wasn't picked, whatever, in the first round. And it's the quarterback, receiver, edge defenders, defensive tackle, offensive tackle, cornerback. Those are the most valuable positions, I think, in football in general, but also how the NFL use it, right? So there were 3 quarterbacks. There were 4 wide receivers, 7 defensive ends, edge defenders, 4 defensive tackles, 5 offensive tackles, and 4 cornerbacks. So that's the kind of thing. And if you look at those positions for Notre Dame, I think you already went into Ben Morrison. I mean, we already talked about Cam Hart. I mean, certainly like they got a bunch of young talent coming up. I think, Gray is obviously an exciting talent, and he's a big time athlete. Micah Bell has like outstanding speed. He's not the tallest guy, so that might hurt him or whatever. But, you have to have these kind of traits where you're like, okay, this guy can maybe be this one day. And I think Notre Dame has done a pretty good job of that. Like Jaden Mickey too is like another guy that, I mean, you got to see how he runs and all that kind of stuff. But like, if you told me Jaden Mickey ends up being a high pick like 3 years from now, I wouldn't be surprised, right? Like, I think he's got that kind of talent in him, and he's also got the kind of like love for the game, and that's also part of it too. And then at quarterback, right? Like, they have a that is just always TBD, right? So it's like easy to just say CJ Carr, like, of course it's going to be. Like over 70% of the 5-star quarterbacks bust. And I'm not saying that to say like have low expectations for CJ Carr, but I'm just saying that's a reality. Not a lot of guys go super, super high that are there. There's for every Trevor Lawrence, there's a JT Daniels, right? There's a lot of that too. So you just have to wait and kind of see how that plays out. But there's a lot of this stuff like defensive tackles, like, are you going to get, it's one of the reasons why they're after Justin Scott, because it's like physically you're like, oh, this has got a guy has stuff that the NFL teams will covet. And if you can get the best out of him, then he is going to be a guy who could be a first round pick one day. Yeah. But I think right now, that's one of the things you see with Notre Dame where they're getting bigger guys. They're not taking like, trying to find the next Aaron Donald is like a bad bet. You know what I mean? Like, even trying to find the next Sheldon Day is kind of a bad bet, even though like Jason Elwell was a good player. But of course, you'd always rather, I mean, if it's a tie, you're always going to take the bigger guy who can handle himself a little bit more. So that's like part of it too. So I think Notre Dame has landed bigger guys with bigger traits, like exciting traits. I think they've offensive tackle. I mean, you never worry about Notre Dame being able to recruit like first round offensive tackles. They land guys that are ranked highly. I know this class, they haven't landed that guy yet, but even then it's like about getting guys that like super big guys that got the great feet and you develop them and whatever, right? Like no one was saying Ronnie Stanley, like no doubt first round pick at the time. It's like getting that guy and developing him. Even McGlinchey too, right? Was like a low 4-star, right? So that's part of it. I mean, at receiver, I think the fact that they have Cam Williams in the class, like that's a guy that you can see, because 5-star receivers, like that's like something that can happen for obviously for those guys. Like, you might get, there's some of like the low guys. Zay Flowers was a guy in this class who was whatever, but I mean, you don't want to go shooting in the dark for guys like that all the time. If you see a guy like that and you think that, oh man, he's way overrated, I have no problem with them taking him then. But I think for the most part, you got to land the guys who have, like you said, the Braylon James, the Tobias Merriweather, those kind of traits, right? Like, I think that matters. And then at defensive end, right? Like, if you're not, okay, you want to get the Keon Keeleys and you want to get the Elijah Rushings, right? And if you're not getting those guys, though, you have to get guys that Isaiah Foskey's, right? You have to get guys that, like, even though obviously he's still a high pick and obviously great player for Notre Dame, but like guys who has that projectable traits. And he was a guy who he was more of a tight end, really, right? And then that was the thing. And that was like obviously a great take and a great get for Notre Dame. And I see Notre Dame kind of moving in that direction now with a lot of the guys that they've taken, like Bryce Young. I mean, it's so far away that whatever. But I'm just saying, physically, when you look at him as a guy who can move and his length and stuff like that, you think like, hey, that's a guy I think could play in the NFL one day.
And that's the body type that the NFL is looking for.
Yes. Yeah. So anyways, that was just a long run thing.
No, it's all good. So I posted this mock draft. Matt Freeman posted it on Twitter. Mock draft from Sharp Football Analysis. A couple things. Joe Alt going number 4. Blake Fisher going number 11. Which, if Blake Fisher is projected to be number 11, then there's no amount of money.
No, he's not staying.
And he will not be at Notre Dame in 2024. So, but look at the positions, right? Quarterback, receiver, tackle, edge, quarterback, edge, D-line, tackle, D-line, tackle, corner, tackle, D-line, receiver.
Yeah. Also too, like Chris, he gone, like, Yes, he will be gone if that's the case. But one thing to take into account with this, I always bring it up, and whatever. I'm not doing it to shade Matt Miller, the guy who's the NFL draft scout on Twitter or whatever, who works for ESPN now. He was Bleacher Report before.
Yeah.
He had, I'll never forget it. He had, I think, 6 Notre Dame guys in his first round mock for the thing. And I was like, okay, like, I mean, I cover the team. There's just, they don't have 6 first round picks.
Well, it's people, Corey Robinson on it.
Corey Robinson was on there. Sheldon Day was on there. Sheldon Day obviously ended up having a great senior season and was like, you know, he was like second team All-American, whatever. Sure. Really good college football player. But also too, like, unless they thought he was Aaron Donald, he wasn't going there. Like, it just was not, it wasn't a realistic thing, right? It wasn't a realistic thing. So I'm not saying that Fisher can't be like one of those high picks, but like, take all the kind of stuff with a grain of salt. Even with Joe Alt right now, who I think it's pretty consensus. Like, I would be shocked if he doesn't have a great year and become a first round pick. Even the stuff with like him being top 5. I mean, it depends. Like, there might be another couple offensive tackles that are like, they like better than him at the time or whatever. Right. Like, no one knows at this point, but I think it's fair to say that he's going to have another All-American type year and probably be a high pick. But I mean, to say he's going to be top 5 now, like, I mean, no one knows.
Yeah. All right, let's leave it there. Thank you everyone for tuning in. This was a fun show. Really good time there. So keep a heads up. 2024 receiver Mikey Gilbert is going to be announcing today at 5:00. Notre Dame is a finalist for him. So should he commit to Notre Dame, we're going to be talking about him on Thursday. And if he doesn't, then we won't. So that's the deal there. But you're going to want to tune in on Thursday. We're going to have another fun topic for you. We haven't talked about it yet. But it'll be great, right? It always is great, Jamie. We always have a good time talking Notre Dame football. So we'll be back on Thursday. So check out, like I said, stay tuned for Mikey Gilbert. And if he commits, check out irisportsdaily.com. There will be a lot of stuff on there. Jamie will have a Film Don't Lie on him. He's 8 Eastern, so that's 5 Pacific, right? So that's what's going on. So, all right. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Have a good couple of days, and we will talk to you again on Thursday.